It's debunked. Number 10. Humans are natural vegetarians. To answer whether or not this often used statement is the case, we need to look at humans on an anatomical level. Okay, so we're definitely not...
I don't agree with labels. You're boxing people in and discriminating them by putting labels on people. Rather, people can do isms, practices.
Primarily carnivores. Our teeth are certainly no good for tearing through flesh in the same...
There's no such thing as carnivores, omnivores, herbivores, parasites, whatever. Species do what they do to survive. Given certain conditions, species will behave differently. And because those species consume primarily a certain type of consumption does not make them a labeled species. And if you look at their species relations in their families, the species very closely related to them, for example, us and 10,000 BC, we're like 2% of them now. Cavemen, what's their technical name? Anyways, we lived among them. They lived among us. We interspecies sexed up each other and ate similar things. We eat this, they eat that. You know, it's a big mixture, melting pot. And we did what we did to survive. They did what they did to survive. But it doesn't box species in, doesn't box us in.
It's lions, for example. Plus, the acid in our guts is nowhere near strong enough to digest raw meat. So, if we are looking to work in line...
There was a lion called Little Tyke. He was fed veganism foods. And, yeah, he survived. According to the story. And... so it just goes to show how far species can go doing certain consumption habits.
By anatomical design, our diet should be similar to that of our cousins, monkeys and apes. Their dinner time mainly consists of fruits, nuts and leaves.
We're 99.8% identical to bonobos.
Sounds awful. So we too must be natural vegetarians, right? Well, actually, wrong. According to Live Science, learning to cook and eating meat was actually what evolved humans from apes. Studies published in the National Academy of Sciences.
There's lots of different scientific studies, making conclusions. I don't agree with that type of science, coming to conclusions. Science changes, and science is based on theories. A conclusion isn't a valid consequence of something that continuously changes based on new evidence. So, but anyways, lots of different studies say a lot of different things, and I will say, just to point reference to, there's studies from highly regarded academic fields from universities and colleges and stuff that do say that species consumed fruit primarily, and that we evolved big brains from fruit. Whether or not that's the case, it doesn't matter, because evolution and survival isn't based on brain size. In fact, our brains, one could argue, is causing our sixth mass extinction. And things like bacteria are well more intelligent than humans, and they don't have brains. So that's not really a important point to this discussion.
found it would be biologically implausible for humans to develop such a large brain without the extra calorie boost that comes from a meat-based diet. And it's this larger and more developed brain which is key in distinguishing us from our ape cousins. So what this ultimately shows us is that humans are
so brain size, if you want to talk about a brain size doesn't necessarily mean intelligence when it comes to brain complexity, because there's like bonobos and gorillas. They've put gorillas, I don't agree with this, but they've put them in domesticated settings, and gorillas can speak up to like over 300 sign language actions to communicate their needs or their desires. And bonobos have like a very much more well, it depends on circumstances of which humans and what level of health and intelligence, but bonobos seem to have significantly more intelligence, if I would call it that, at memorization. They can memorize, like, if they're in the jungle, they could, if we did a certain kind of test, like a mapping test and a navigational test, we could see them probably go from specific tree to tree, and like, they would be like excellent taxi drivers.
Evolutionarily plant and meat eaters. It's likely that if it wasn't for meat, we would never have gotten up the food chain. Number 9. Eating soy causes cancer.
So getting up the food chain, that's a big generality. And so is veganism. I'm telling you, there's numerous types of veganism. So if someone's claiming to debunk veganism and they're umbrella terming it, that's a huge red flag, because just like theism, you can't say God, which God, the Abrahamic God, the Messianic God, the whatever, Jewish, the Hindu God, the flying spaghetti monster, you know? It's ridiculous to say you want to generalize, you want to say generalize humanity, say humans, and then talk about like how this pen manufacturer, I don't know, you know what I'm saying though, right?
One myth commonly cited by non-vegans is that eating soy, one of the biggest meat substitutes in a vegan diet, increases the risk of cancer, most notably breast cancer.
Okay, he makes some sense, but I want to clarify the etymological dictionary definitions. There's an allopathic model and there's a naturopathic model, or natural hygienic model. This may be new to anyone who's watching this video, and it's vital, and it's hard to find. And this is a very unique veganism perspective. So, allopathy is based on medicine. It's based on suppressing symptoms. It's based on having symptoms and trying to alleviate the symptoms without addressing causes. And what natural hygiene does, orthopathy, is you don't agree with the medical model. So when he says cancer, it's partly accurate. It's more of it's a process, a stage, because it's a continuous development. It's not a static, boxed in condition. It's a condition based on a multitude of factors, and it constantly changes. So it's called canceration. And canceration is just one step, one stage of disease. And it's a later stage of disease. It's not like your common cold, which is in quotes, because that's just describing symptoms, and it's not something that has no cause. Or I'll get into that later.
This is a myth, but where did it come from? Well, it's because of the isoflavone.
But anyways, soy. I don't agree with soy. That's a certain type of veganism that consumes soy. So he's immediately assuming that people doing veganism consume soy. And that's not... Yes, many people who do veganism do consume soy products. And yes, I agree, it causes canceration. It can contribute as a factor of canceration. A very minimal factor. There's a lot of other factors that make canceration a process. But this doesn't not contribute to the process of canceration.
That are found in soy. They are plant-derived estrogens, and since most breast cancers are sensitive to estrogen, soy has been linked to causing breast cancer. But according to dietitian Catherine Zaratsky, food sources of soy don't contain high enough levels of isoflavones to increase the risk of breast cancer. In fact,
I haven't met a single person labeled dietitian that has read anything about natural hygiene or orthopathy. And if you guess what? They'll completely ignore any type of document provided, or they'll just ignore doing scientific research and studies, and they'll come to a conclusion, a biased hearsay conclusion, immediately based on assumptions and financial agendas to protect their welfare of their job security as a main motivational factor in many cases, seemingly. I'm not gonna make statements here.
the American Cancer Society even reported that there is growing evidence that eating traditional soy foods may even lower the risk of hormone-dependent cancers, such as breast cancer. This might be because the isoflavones can actually block the more potent natural estrogens in the blood, therefore making cancer less likely to grow. And if that's not enough of a health benefit in itself, the British National Health Service reported that a diet high in fibre, such as that supplied by eating soy products, has been found to lower the risk of other cancers such as bowel and colorectal. Number 8. A vegan diet reverses heart disease. According to the British Heart Foundation, it's been long speculated that a low-fat...
So again, disease, a body, that's the medical model. They try to chop your arm off when you have leprosy. They try to, or diabetes, they try to tear out parts of your brain and give you fake stomachs and stuff. That's how they deal with disease. They think it's compartmentalized and that it's specific to specific parts of the body, but the body is a unit. It works congruently, and it's made up of approximately 70% of water in healthy individuals. So water is very transmutable, if that's the word, and you can't take a log out of a river and expect that river to not go through eutrophication or whatever, you know what I mean? You can't put a plane in the sky and inject it with aerosols and think that's going to solve what's causing the air to heat up. Okay? It's about taking the causes and not saying that certain conditions are fixed and isolated. It's very interdependent and biologically mixed. these conditions aren't isolated from each other. It's not like one person has diabetes and another person has heart disease. It's that one person is significantly enervated and has low vitality, and so does the other person. And their bodies, based on their genetic weaknesses, are dying in that specific place more rapidly than something else. And it's still being caused by identical causes.
A vegetarian or vegan diet is the only one capable of reversing heart disease. And yes, going vegan certainly has a lot of health benefits, but this isn't necessarily one of them. A British Heart Foundation study published in 2014 looked at 198 patients to investigate whether eating a strict plant-based diet could in fact stop or even reverse heart disease. It found that in the 177 patients who stuck to the diet, the majority reported a reduction in heart disease symptoms, and 22% had disease reversal symptoms confirmed by test results. So far, so accurate. But the study didn't just rule out animal products, it also cut out sugar, juice, salt and nuts, products which vegans can eat as part of their diet. Therefore, to say it's a vegan diet alone that reverses heart disease is somewhat inaccurate. In fact, not only is it inaccurate, but...
So, let's talk about this, huh? Veganism, plants? How many plants are there on this planet? Can you answer that? I actually don't know off the top of my head, but it's a massive number. It's in the hundreds of thousands, okay? So, that's where you need to, that's where it's important to not blanket statement generalize anything basically about this. I mean, to come to a conclusion, and I'm not sure what I'm getting at, but it's just important to not make up your mind and make assumptions about things when in fact there's a multitude of different dietary decisions a person can make if they're consuming vegan, if they're doing veganism.
The opposite may just be true. That's because, according to work published by the NHS, some unbalanced plant-based diets can even increase the risk of heart disease. Number 7. Fish don't feel pain.
Veganism could literally be eating rocks, okay? It's a simply elimination of animals. There's animals, plantae, fungi, prokaryotes, eukaryotes, protista, the kingdoms. So this is eliminating one kingdom from a diet. And then there's non-living things. People certainly have eaten non-living things. You can go to Shoe Nice's channel and watch him eat McDonald's wrappers, okay? That would technically the veganism is an ideology. Well, I wouldn't say an ideology. It's a ethical philosophy. But in terms of nutrition, if it's not animal products, it's a very it doesn't have animal products, but you can look up the definition of veganism. I won't talk about that now because that's not necessarily related to this video.
It's sometimes thought by non-vegans or pescatarians that fish have a short-term memory and are insensate, which means, therefore, they can be caught, killed and eaten without guilt. Well, they're wrong. Back in 2016, the journal Animal Sentience published Australian neuroscientist Brian Key's essay, Why Fish Do Not Feel Pain. Now, in it, he argued that it's only mammal brains that have a structure called the neocortex, which therefore means they feel suffering. So fish who don't have a neocortex mustn't be able to feel pain. Here's the thing though, that's like saying just because we travel using legs, then fish who have no legs can't travel. It doesn't really stack up. Angling is the so-called gentle art, but there's really nothing gentle about it. According to Peter, scientists have identified and mapped out 20 pain receptors in fish's mouths and their heads. Among them is the very areas where an angler's barbed hook would penetrate a fish's flesh while catching it for food. Peter also notes that fish have been found to release endorphins, and just like in us mammals, the only reason for their nervous system to produce these painkillers is to alleviate pain. Number 6.
Yes, and I will extend that further, which many people who do veganism, if you don't even know what veganism is about, or if you're very new to all this, I'm giving you some very insider knowledge about things that most vegan people doing veganism don't even agree with. But they don't take their logic to the next sensible step, which is predation. And if you're gonna say that many people doing veganism are trying veganism think that predation is a valuable and important part of veganism, and I call that veganism. And fish do feel pain, and therefore it's important that we try to make decisions that prevent them from getting eaten from other fish or species. This extends beyond humans trying to protect animals from humans. And that's where I disagree with a lot of people doing veganism, is that it's important that we figure out how to prevent other animals from causing harm to other animals too.
Vegan diets are dangerous for children. It's widely acknowledged that the first year of life is one of the most important developmental periods for a child. And it's also widely acknowledged that nutritional deficiencies are common among those who adopt a vegan diet. So surely it follows that a child raised on a vegan diet will not receive all the nutrients needed for the first stages of life. Well, not necessarily. According to Britain's NHS and the British Diet...
Okay, so put that logic onto children born in Africa who are fed very hardly anything. Compare the apples to apples, but it's not. Because I don't know. I'm not sure about that, but if you stretch your mind and think about things like that, like how many children here's some questions. It's important to have inquirious questions when you hear people make statements. So what I would ask in these situations is how many people doing that eat animal products, how many children of theirs die and get sick? You'll be staggered by it. Millions of children are dying and are in late stage diseases and stuff. So then when you start to nitpick veganism, you can see there's certain cases of children having difficulties, and there's a lot of factors about that. Ones that make up wellness is not, there's it's not isolated. It's not the diet that's the only factor, and although that can be a significant factor, so they're making blanket statements.
Dietetic Association, a well-planned vegan-based diet can be suitable for anyone of any age. In fact, some scientists have even speculated that a vegan diet might be of more health benefit for children due to its naturally low saturated fat content. Of course, with a vegan diet, there is risk of vitamin D, calcium, iron and vitamin B12 deficiency. Yet with the right planning, knowledge and supplements, a child can get everything they need.
Okay, so how about historians do studies on people who ate primarily fruit See, let's see this. The science is missing. We need research on people consuming fruit. If you say that people need supplements for doing veganism, what type of veganism? And what about all the species, billions and trillions of species for 3.4 billion years? Did they consume supplements?
Eat while following a vegan diet. The same too can be said for pregnant women. As long as mums-to-be make sure they get enough iron and vitamins B12 through supplements, it's perfectly safe to remain on a vegan diet during pregnancy. But I want to hear from you. Would you raise your child on a vegan diet, even if you're not vegan? Let us know in the comments down below. Number 5. Veganism is just about diet. Okay, so far we've spoken about myths surrounding a vegan diet. But as any one of the 6.5 million vegans in the US would tell you, being a vegan isn't just about food, it's a lifestyle choice, which tries to avoid cruelty to animals in any way. And don't worry.
Yeah, so veganism, as done by Alan... Oh, my memory's not with me today so well. But, the guy who came up with the term veganism says that it's a way of seeking harm and exploitation. I'm paraphrasing. Harm and exploitation to animals as far as practicable and possible. And how would you know? If you don't know something's possible, then you're doing it to the best of your ability and the best of your knowledge. So, could a person doing, technically by that logic, see, the definition itself is contradictory, and like if you go deep into general semantics and language, there's so much language throughout tons of different philosophies and ethics that are contradictory. But for the sake of this definition, technically a person consuming meat could do veganism because based on their limited knowledge, and if they say that they value animal life and they're doing what they know how to do, to that extent that they know, then technically you could say they're doing veganism. And that's where it's important to get specific. So if you do, if you have knowledge, if someone's presented knowledge to you, and you don't comprehend it, then you're not participating in information sharing, and that's not that's like anti-practice. So I don't that's why I don't prefer to use labels. I use isms and practices. So if people speciesism and predispecism is more about discrimination. So to consider species as divided from us rather than similarities. And it's important to focus on similarities of life in general, biological life. There's a lot of different needs to classify of what constitutes a living organism versus a non-living object. There's like 18 of them.
they'll let you know they're vegan.
Wildish Brits. Rude, a bit wild.
Vegan. As such, there are a whole host of things that you may not realise aren't vegan. First up, there's smoking. For one, the act of smoking itself is harmful to the planet and the animals within it, but the manufacturing methods of cigarettes also frequently involve animal testing. Then there's condoms. While there are vegan-friendly condoms out there, most regular condoms contain...
That's where people get mixed up. They take absolutism. It's a type of philosophy. It's called dualistic altruism and existentialism. They take things to absolutistic terms and definitions, and in general semantics, we don't use all or nothing terminologies. We get specific, and things are based on continuums and spectrums. So you can be doing a massive amount of harm to animals, which can be identifiable based on their pain and pleasure, which can be measured through chemicals in brains and energy output. You could measure it in a life's energy value and quantity of species dying, and there's a lot of different ways to measure how much harm you do to other animals. So veganism is a way. It's important to clarify it as a spectrum rather than an absolutistic philosophy, and that's where the original definition causes confusion, because it has absolutistic terms in it, and it's like a lot of definitions, they get outdated based on new information. And so I would redefine veganism, and that's where there's a lot of debate, because in language there's a lot of debate in language itself and definitions itself. So it's about reducing the amount of harm you cause to other species as far as you can with the knowledge you have. And I think everyone's on. See, I'm not going to say everyone because that's absolutism, but each person certainly would agree with that under certain ways of speaking about it. But to smoke cigarettes, which causes testing on animals, is doing less veganism, quantifiably less veganism, but not practicably, if that makes sense, or if I'm articulating accurately. It's causing less harm to not smoke, based on just that isolated fragment. Smoking and not smoking. Not smoking causes less harm to animals. But then if you tie it into all these other factors, it could go up or down a little bit based on what the cumulative effect is.
Casein. It's a protein derived from cow or goat's milk, which softens the latex, making it more comfortable for human use. And don't forget about all the medicines that contain animal-based derivatives, such as lactose and gelatin.
So I'll debunk the medicine is allopathy. Again, I'm talking about naturopathy, which doesn't use supplements. Doesn't use medication.
That's not even to mention the fact that all medicine in the US and in the UK too is lawfully required to be safety tested on animals before entering the market. All of this means that no medicine is technically vegan.
Safety tested. Is that safe for the animals? No. Are these medications safe for people? I legally can't tell you if they're not or if they are. I can just say that an ethical practice philosophy of natural hygienism, orthopathism, is about calling medication as harmful.
And friendly, quite the predicament if you're feeling under the weather. Number 4. Rearing cattle is bad for the environment. Cattle are often cited as being one of the